Hey everybody, what is going on? This is Scott Garber back in the saddle of the Profluence Sports podcast, where we are highlighting founders, investors, executives across the global sport landscape. Today, I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Rick Wolf, founder of DraftNation 2026, bringing the live fantasy draft experience to Circa in Las Vegas this year. Rick, my man, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Every day that I'm in the fantasy sports industry is a great one. And I certainly have turned my life from being an IBM programmer, a digit head, to being able to care about sports and develop some of the coolest things. So I'm really excited to talk to you about all of it.
Yeah, man. And I'm excited to learn, Rick. It's been really neat. If you don't live under a rock, a lot of fan engagement is done through fantasy sports. And whether that's in your parents' basement, whether that's in a garage with your buddies, this elusive draft day has always captured our attentions, specifically dads. And although not limited to, excited to go ahead and truly learn the evolution of fantasy, Rick, as we learn and navigate your journey, which will then lead us into this amazing crescendo moment, bringing digital and physical together at the pool, at the Circa. So, Rick, as we always do, man, it's important to understand who you are and really what led to you building DraftNation. So pass the mic over, give the listeners a little context to your journey in the fantasy world.
Sure. So, growing up, I think a lot of us loved baseball cards and the whole statistics thing. I was a huge baseball fan. My family founded baseball in New York and in Connecticut in 1869. They played the first game in each place with Cartwright's rules that have the foul lines for the first time. And so it's in my blood. And I didn't realize that until after my mother passed away. But now, I understand why I've loved baseball my whole life. So when I got to IBM after graduating from college, I started programming there, and I was the only one, 120 programs, the only one who really liked sports. So every time there was something sports related, I raised my hand. And in 1989, I got the blessing of being on the team that built the first online fantasy baseball game, Baseball Manager, for Prodigy service 5 years before the internet. So it was pre-internet. I also put ESPN.com on Prodigy by building their tools. And then when Michael Levy wanted to start SportsLine, it was basically a betting service, but it was a sports service out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He contacted me and said, I want to get everybody who was on your team who built all those tools for ESPN, and I want to bring them all to Florida. And I said, well, it was just me. So there were only 3 other employees there at the time, and it's the ride of my life. It was Shaq, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, IBM US West, Kleiner Perkins, Ron Ellison from Sun Microsystems, Barksdale from Netscape. IMG was a major investor. And we cobbled up $185 million really fast. And I just got to spend that as we built SportsLine USA to become CBSSports.com and then go public in 97. And it was just a crazy ride. Nobody slept, just a fantastic thing. But one of the most important things was pitching Kleiner Perkins that they couldn't just do betting. Like when we broke down the market into casual fan, team fan, fantasy fan, gambler, historian, and collector, they wanted to remove the fantasy fan. They didn't understand it. Nobody really did. But when we did our research, 12% of Americans already played. And so it was more than the gambler. So we created a whole division for it. And that's what really makes fantasy go mainstream there, is that decision for Michael Levy and CBS Sports to embrace it. And then you still have that platform as a very popular way to play. So
Rick, let me ask you this, man. And we're going to go sort of all over today because you just cover a wide breadth of, from origination to the way we participate in fantasy. So there's going to be a bunch that we cover. Could you ever imagine when you were in the early 90s, starting to put the framework around what fantasy is and how people are engaging, that we would have 60 million folks participating in an NFL football season here in 2026? Could you ever see that kind of scale with the product when you were starting it?
No, but in 1997, late 1997, I went to Michael Levy and we had all this money. And I said, I think we can consolidate the entire industry under the CBS Sports brand. Give me 20 million and I'll go talk to everybody and I'll buy the companies and bring them in. And so he gave me the money and I went out to try and buy the companies. What I found out was everybody loved fantasy so much that they didn't want to give up their companies, even if it was like their hobby. And so no matter how much money I had, I felt like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman walking into the store with all the money and nobody would sell her a dress to wear. And so then I converted from being like sort of a corporate raider guy. I was a programmer who got excited by the whole business side of things to wow, these guys are right. Fantasy is it. And I left CBS and started RotoWorld and then sold that to NBC. And then I left NBC because they didn't want me to stay in fantasy any longer either. And I've just stayed, and I started Fantasy Alarm. I've just stayed in fantasy the whole time. And one thing, the important moment about what we're doing at DraftNation2026.com and why we're doing it is because it was the first social network. It was how you got together. My 1988 fantasy league had lunch every Monday in order to make our transactions in person because you couldn't do it over the internet, right?
Yeah.
And so it was very social, and we were buddies. We would go out on Friday nights. It was a whole big thing to be in a fantasy league. Because of the pandemic, everybody went online. And even when people who were having in-person drafts all went online. And we said to ourselves, now, this is why this is the perfect time, because people need to get back in person for their drafts. And so at DraftNation2026.com, especially people who have leagues, should contact us because we're going to make the leagues the most important thing of this. And then individuals can come, of course, and play with our partner, National Fantasy Football, NFFC, in high stakes. We're giving a $300,000 prize out for leagues there.
Wow.
And that's a great celebration too. So if you want to come individually and compete in a high stakes league, great. You want to bring your league there? We'll do your punishments for you. We'll do your draft orders for you. We'll have celebrities. We have Adrian Peterson signed up. We're going to announce other big celebrities very shortly as we're finishing the signings on those. Michelle Beadle is going to be our master of ceremonies. And it's just going to be a great 2 days to celebrate, the best day in your year, I think, for everybody is fantasy football draft day.
Yeah, no, and I'm really excited. Later in the show, we're going to unpack what that whole experience is going to be like, right? Because I think it is interesting when you look at a communal activity that was forced to go online. Now, across the whole sporting landscape, humans are begging to be in person, right? So we're going to touch on what that whole experiences look like. Rick, I have a question for you, right? Because this to me, the trade association that you're a part of or sit as a founding board member, Fantasy Sports Trade Association, right? This has been around for almost 29 years now, right? So this isn't like something that's been around, the last couple of years. Talk to me about the relationship as, how does the association or the trade association sit in relation to players, in relation to the large distribution channels where the activity's happening? What exactly is that nonprofit governing or helping sort of steer this fantasy in the direction of?
One of the reasons I keep leaving major media companies to stay in fantasy is the community and the caring that exists in that community, right? But this association has morphed multiple times, and basically it does changes to be whatever is needed in this in the industry. So it started as the Fantasy Sports Players Association, FSPA, to protect fantasy from being thought of as gambling. And so we got in there, we did education, and we made sure that it was that everybody knew it wasn't gambling. And when they came down hard on Bodog and Bovada and MVP Sportsbook in Costa Rica, when the government came down hard, and they came down hard on Microsoft and Google for pushing people to those places, we were like, oh, not us. And we protected all of the fantasy companies and the companies like CBS that were in fantasy, and ESPN and Yahoo. And so that was an important role. And then we switched to be the FSTA in 2002 because we thought our job was done. So we said, let's be a trade association and help each other. There's a lot of things to get through now. There's a lot of things to figure out. How do we get customers? How do we grow the industry? How do we get mainstream to grab onto it? So that's when MLB and NFL.com made their own versions of it. That's when ESPN jumped in. That's when Yahoo really exploded. That's when CBS kept pushed even harder. And that's when it really built from 2002 to 2005 or so. And then we had the league say, we should own this. And they came after us, and we defended ourselves in a different way in 2005. We spent money on an amicus brief that said that the statistics were public domain, and we sort of saved both sports betting and fantasy from being owned by all of the leagues. And then in 2015, we defended again when the governments came down and said DFS was illegal. And, we said the carve-out that we helped create in 2006 in the Safe Port Act, we said that would be a component that we could use in order to make sure that DFS is legal. And we fought all those battles. And the FS, then TA, spent a lot of money, like close to $1 million on lobbying and other stuff, along with DraftKings and FanDuel and a couple of our members who spent a lot more in order to protect our hobby. And then in 2018, when PASPA was repealed, we changed again. And that's when we became the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association, so that we can include and protect and lobby for sports betting. And now that it was legal, because we really believed it should have been legal from the word go. And we honestly, in 2009, when Governor Christie at the time put it on the ballot and sort of pushed the unconstitutionality of it, we knew eventually it was going to go. We thought it would be right away. We thought it would be 2010 or so. And it took 8 more years. But that's the sort. I mean, that's a long-winded way of giving the whole
No, this is
history of the
wonderful.
FSGA. But now we all just care about each other in sports betting and fantasy, and try and help each other, especially with legislation. How do I get up in the state of New York? How do I get up in Pennsylvania? Who do I pay? What are the regulations? All those things the FSGA now helps people understand and helps them save money in the process of being able to run their fantasy leagues and their sports betting properties.
I love it. No, and I mean, look, at that little history lesson is super important to watch the evolution of, it really tells a neat story of the space, right? Who we're protecting, where the commercial dollars are being spent, and then always this sort of seesaw, right? Of like where you guys are landing and who can be protected under that umbrella.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Rick, we're going to go DraftNations2026.com here for a second. Is this only for DFS players, or are we able to come in here and if I'm running a guillotine league, a best ball, if I'm running a pick'em, like give me a little insight, because fantasy is not just one size fits all, right?
Yeah, it's the opposite. It's season long. It's to celebrate. Most people do play season long. They play in a league, even if they play DFS or otherwise. And people play as many as the average is 7.1 leagues that people play in, which is absolutely nuts, right? So with 60 million people playing, an average of 7 leagues, I mean, it could be a ton of drafts. Now, they're playing in some leagues that don't draft or have different processes for drafting. So we think it's well up over 200 million drafts every year now. So,
holy smokes.
But it's all about the seasonal player and actually promoting your draft there. Daily fantasy sports doesn't happen for another 3 weeks. So we won't have that there. This is all about your draft, your league, your social network, your group of 10 or 12 people who you love so much that you just want to party with. And how can we do your draft Vegas style? DraftNation2026.com.
Come on, baby. Let them know. If you can't tell, Rick Wolf was on SiriusXM Radio. This isn't his first time making subtle plugs at the end of a segment. Rick, let me ask you this, man. We are all going through massive changes right now as AI is speaking English. It's now working into our processes. You come from the IBM world, though, so you understand the technical side and the application. Talk to us in the last 24 months. What have been some of the evolutions that you've been able to witness or help orchestrate as AI has become more widespread? Whether that's from running leagues, drafts, different player information. Give me some insight to how AI is impacting the fantasy world.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll say this for anybody out there who's listening: embrace AI. Whatever job you're in, it can make you better, it can make you faster, it can make you smarter if you're using it right. So for programmers especially, now with the speed of computers, AI can type faster than any programmer can. So if you can give it the right prompts and just watch it, and now it's typing faster than you could ever type. And then you can stop it, and then you can redirect it. And I use it the same way when I'm doing documents, right? If I'm creating a document or trying to do research, trying to find some more information, create a great prompt. I use both Claude and ChatGPT. I know there's people who use 10 different ones, but Claude is your programming one and the one that can help you with things that are a little bit more complicated. And ChatGPT is basically my everyday browser now. And that, just embrace it and grab it, and it'll be able to do a lot of stuff for you. So. We vibe coded DraftNation2026.com with Claude, and we built in a full affiliate system and payment management, and we now have the ability to have people promote us, and we know how to track it. It's tracking every sale for us. It's giving us where it came from, and then we're able to do our marketing a lot better so that we can make sure that we pack this place.
It's incredible to watch it both in our business and on our business. I'm curious, like from the Profluence lens, we see so many different data companies coming online to help make better picks, to help understand, where the player came from, what they're currently doing. Are there any tools that, from your side that you lean on as you're picking your team going into this season to help make sure that you are making the best choices? Like, give us a little insider tips as you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old school about the way I do. So it's more about certain metrics that I do that I'll bring in that information and say, I'll connect ChatGPT with my database of statistical data for the last 3 years, and then maybe projections data from a couple of different places. And then I'll ask it to determine for me certain things. Air yards for quarterbacks is a very good one, so that that quarterbacks throwing downfield, right? That those guys are more likely to have more yards and more touchdowns. And so I look at some of the metrics and I bring those in, and then I bring those sheets to me, and then it automates me creating my cheat sheets for drafts. But for me, for fantasy football, it's more just fun. For fantasy baseball, I'm really crazed
Is
about.
that your
I
one?
think fantasy football is just something people should just have a blast with. And
Yeah.
the people who are ultimately like super competitive at it, great, good, go have fun. But really it's more about getting those 12 people together that you care about and having a matchup on the weekend and rooting for your guys, they rooting for their guys, and have some good trash talking going on, get a good punishment at the end of the year, and have fun with it. So more so than
Yeah.
for me, more so than winning. Now, daily fantasy sports I think is different. During the football season, it's great to wake up on a Sunday morning, analyze everything, make a few bets, and put a few lineups in. That makes the day even more fun. But for you and your buddies and DraftNation2026.com, that's the way to go. Just have a blast.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, we're gonna go off kilter here, and then we're gonna spend the back half of the show walking us through everything that's coming down in Vegas here in a couple months. Rick, let's talk real quick though, right? We're watching from the Profluence lens an emerging trend of new leagues, right? And fantasy has always been this really unique way to go ahead and drive engagement, get to know the players, get to understand the rules, but in a pretty friendly communal way. So, obviously you touched on football, baseball, hockey, some of the big four we know have it. What is Give me some examples and some thoughts as to like as new leagues are coming in, whether it's high rocks or fishing or disc golf, like can daily fantasy or season long fantasy be applied to any sport? I'm really speaking more to the founders of these companies that are looking to drive awareness for what they're doing.
I mean, anything that's popular. We used to say a while ago when we were with RotoWorld initially, we need to cover any sport with player news that is on ESPN or on a broadcast network. So we would look out and try to figure out which was the next popular thing. So once it's there, then people can see it and watch it and enjoy the watching of it more by having a little bit of skin in the game, if you will. So,
Yeah,
or they can find people who are like-minded like them, and create that community of people who do like to watch bass fishing on a Saturday. So that I think if it's on TV, then that's what it's all about. Fantasy's always been about making the games more fun to follow and more fun to watch.
very
So
good.
I think
No,
that's the cultural shift there. Is people are now doing multiple things at one time. It used to be that the TV was device number one and the phone was device number two. Now the phone is number one and the TV is number two. So you have to actually program and figure out what you're doing as a business in order to support the phone first and then the actual broadcast of the game. So that's
absolutely.
what we're seeing happen right now, that sort of transition in those two things. It's not the first time. I mean, we saw the same thing as we transitioned from, newspaper and, only seeing highlights to actually full games and people watching full games on Sunday because they could see them all. Remember, we could only see, well, when I was watching, we could only, as a teenager, we could only see, two teams, our local teams, New York Jets and New York Giants, where, now you can see every single game and that creates fans of all types. And that's great for fantasy, and fantasy is great for that.
Yeah, no, and it's continuing to evolve, right? Rick, I'm curious when you look across the landscape, we have Gen Z and Gen Alpha that consume very different than millennials and older. Where do you see sort of like if you're down the fairway, what is that sweet spot of age demo that's engaging in fantasy that make up that 60 million number that we're talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, for the 60 million number is just a continual expansion, by the way. We've had double digit growth for every single year since 1988, except for 2020. When the pandemic was there, basically all fantasy sports stopped. And since
Yep.
baseball couldn't start half season, growth, had a lot of trouble in 2020. But we continue to see that growth. For the next generation, I think what we see, or what I've been seeing, because people like to show me new products, seen a couple products, one out of China and one out of New York, where it's more about entertainment. So instead of if there's a mighty jam by Giannis, they'll actually show that as like an absolute explosion of everything in the venue, and then they'll put it all back to the broadcast. And
Mm,
so we're seeing a sensationalizing because that's something that Gen Z and Gen Alpha like. They like, I would say if they were in the Peds era, they would have liked if Roger Clemens would have thrown a fastball to Barry Bonds. He would have hit it 4,000 feet, and then they both would have exploded.
yeah.
There's just they just like the excitement of stuff. They like to watch epic fails and things on TikTok. And so I think you'll
Quick hit.
see fantasy football become fantasy football, where you'll actually get a highlight reel of your players, but they'll be doing more dramatic things than they did, right? When the guy runs for a touchdown, when he gets an end zone, he'll do like a flip across the back thing, and then there'll be fireworks everywhere. So I think you'll
Yeah.
see some sort of more entertainment-oriented things be added to fantasy sports.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a trend that we're going to watch across, right? It's hard to cater to somebody that was just used to watching the local RSNs that now has access to everything. Also hard to cater to the kid who has everything and you talking about only having two RSNs, right? So it's always trying, like, it's interesting from the league level, the book level, the broadcast level, and then like all the sort of
One
offshoots on how everyone's thinking about it.
one more point to put a pin on that.
Please.
People root for sports differently. People are player fans now, not team fans.
Yes.
My son
Isn't that
my son
interesting?
was a Chris Paul fan. Every time Chris Paul moved teams, he had a new team. I had a Peyton Manning fan in my house. Colts fan, then Denver Broncos fan, right? So people root for players now as much as they root for teams, and they're not afraid to switch fandoms based on a player going to another team.
Is that
And
a byproduct of fantasy?
it's definitely there's no question
Absolutely.
about it. And of fantasy sports coverage, because ESPN and NBC and all the others, they cover the game by covering the players. Players Association was really smart. They did a campaign, helmets off, and they got people to get used to and know the players. And the players started doing endorsements that had them with their faces, not with helmets. And we started to get to know the players on a real level, and that helped fantasy. That continued the boom of fantasy, but it also helped the watching of the sport, because who's gonna watch a crappy Cleveland versus Tampa Bay game in week 13 that's on Sunday Night Football, unless I got Mike Evans on my fantasy team, you know.
Yep.
So it's really helped drive viewership, and it's really great for the game, and it's great for the fans.
Well, and it's catalyzed a whole new stream of business as we look at the era of NIL. To get to know the athlete in a more dynamic way. And, Cannes Lions is going on, Sport Beach is going on right now. And it's incredible to watch the same folks that you have on your fantasy team. Now you have the ability to buy their tequila or wear their socks or like, so it's really neat to watch the athlete develop more than just the rock and jock model. But because we get to know them and we follow them around their journey, now we have this connection with them. And as they launch products, services, and become like the platform themselves, it's really creating an on ramp into what I believe is the next wave of business, the next wave of leagues, and it will be player led. And so it's a really interesting sort of correlation there between what fantasy has done and where the market's going. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
and then you see players buying shares of teams now, because they understand that they'd rather be the owner or the trainer than the jockey,
Absolutely.
and so they're getting themselves into a place where they can be more of an impact,
Yeah.
and to take the sport to another level for them, even when they've aged out of being able to play.
What an exciting time, Rick. Let me ask you this, right? So DraftNation's 2026.com. What was the moment where you said, okay, I have to start to evolve what this looks like and bring everyone together? What was
Yeah,
that where I'm going off the cliff? This is my next venture. Walk us through
going
that.
off the cliff. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, this is a fun one. So, but initially in 1998, when we had all that pile of money, one of the things we wanted to do was do a consumer event, but it wasn't really ready. I mean, there were only like 7 or 8 million people playing in America at that time, and 12.5 million by 2005, and then 23 million, by 2021. Now numbers just shooting through the roofs at over 60 million. So the epiphany for this came when I've been talking about this every year to somebody. I'd be like, oh, we should have done that. Was that a couple other people came to me who had a relationship with the Circa, and they said, we're thinking about throwing a party there. And I said, why don't we make it a national holiday? So I contacted the people at National Calendar Day, and I submitted a brief, a pretty long one, and then they interviewed me a few times. And we're one of the 15 new holidays for this year. National Fantasy Football Draft Day is now a holiday on August 21st in perpetuity, forever. So that's what we're
Wow.
celebrating. We're celebrating this thing we did for the industry, because everything I've ever done is for the industry. And so we're bringing everybody together at Circa for the first one. Then we plan to have satellite packages that we can give to people where they can franchise out of their local bar or restaurant, and we'll give them all the tools and all the things they need to do. And then we'll simulcast through there with the streaming partner the event that goes on at Circa. So the big draft that goes on there. The draft that's going on there is for the Jimmy V Foundation. It's anchored by James Roday and Thomas Everett Scott. We're hoping that the Miz will be there. I'm not sure, but they're going to do a draft for charity, and then we're going to have an auction that's going to be run by the Scott Fishbowl, which is the biggest charity in fantasy. Fantasy Cares gives $1 million to Toys for Tots every single year, and kids get presents for Christmas when they wouldn't normally get them. So those are nice charitable components that are there, and we're going to celebrate at the best venue. Folks, if you have not seen it, just Google Stadium Swim. It's like the greatest thing in the world. It's 28 cabanas, 6 pools, 2 owner suites that go underneath the pools, and it's a 143-foot screen. And we went out there last week to see if we could roll down turf, and we could have field goal kicking contests there, and we'll have across the pools cornhole. We'll be playing all sorts of games down there at the same time as we have both of those 2 drafts, and then the whole thing will be emceed by Michelle Beadle. And we have a guest DJ who we can't announce yet who'll be there, but he's a big star.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be a mammoth event to celebrate the holiday. They're going to come and do a ribbon cutting, and they're going to hand me a proclamation for the day. And National Fantasy Football Draft Day will be. I won't keep it for myself. I'm not just going to sign that and keep it. Everyone who's at the pool there is going to sign my proclamation, and then we're going to put it behind. We're going to put it behind a window at Circa that can be seen all the time, so they can see National Fantasy Football Draft Day has been proclamated.
How cool. If we were doing this interview a couple of years ago, we would have made this an NFT project, and we would have sold a bunch of digital copies of it. But funny how the world evolves. Rick, this is incredible, man. It's, there's a lot of folks that are building new things, very few that I've ever heard cemented and make it an actual holiday. But this makes a ton of sense. I think the one question I have, right, is because fantasy spans year round, not all fans consume the same sport. How does this work for, well, I don't know if baseball is going to have a fantasy draft this year. That's TBD. But How does this work for other sports? Will this holiday be to commemorate and bring everyone together, or will it always be around football?
It will always be around football. And here's the main reason why. Football is perfectly created to be a fantasy sport. It's just perfect. You don't have to be, you can be a novice or an expert and still play and compete. And it's perfectly crafted. The season's short enough, but long enough. And also, you're gonna think this is a crazy number, but it's true. 93% of all fantasy players across all sports play a fantasy football league, even if it's not their favorite sport. So
really?
Almost everyone plays anyway. So we are pulling together the whole community of players anyhow. And it's just the right time. It's the end of the summer. I know there are events for fantasy baseball and other things. Maybe we'll do it for fantasy baseball, because I know Circa has them at their location, but it won't go national like this is going. This is going to go national for the holiday, and we want to be in every city in America next year, and just in every basement, in every front lawn, in every barbecue the year after that.
All right, so this is great. Last real question, and then I got a rapid fire one for you, and then we're going to take this thing home.
All right.
But like, if I'm listening to this, do I have to be the commissioner to come to this event? Can I be just an individual? Can I bring my whole squad? Who's invited to this event?
Absolutely, everyone's invited, and so you can see the ticket packages at DraftNation2026.com. There's a party section. You just want to come to the party and celebrate the holiday, and play a best ball or two. Those are part of packages. And then there's I want to be there for the whole weekend. I want to meet, we have 20 fantasy analysts signed up already. Everybody in the industry will certainly be there. We have all the partners, everybody from RotoWorld, out, NBC Sports, etc. And then, we have packages for that. And those also include a VIP package. And there's only 300 of those available. And that's because we'll have an ending party with all the athletes and celebrities at that for a more personal experience there. But two of the play packages come with an entry to the NFFC Championship, the Football Guys Championship. That's a $350,000 prize. So it's a great opportunity to play in that tournament. But we really want commissioners and others to come to us, because imagine drafting your league out of a cabana in Stadium Swim, and then having pundits come through, whether it's Howard Bender or Jeff Erickson or any of these other guys who you listen to on SiriusXM come through and critique your draft. Adrian Peterson stops by, Michelle Beadle's there, another Hall of Famer who's not signed yet stops by, and they're part of your draft. Now, if one of your draft members doesn't come, that's when it gets fun, because we are going to make sure that everybody sits in on your draft, and that last person who couldn't make the trip gets punished for not making.
How cool. I mean, you can feel the excitement. This is quite literally what sport is about, right? And we're learning that you don't have to be in an arena watching a team in order to go ahead and exercise the same beauty of what we all care about sport, which is the tribalism, which is the communal aspect of it, and really just belonging to something bigger than yourself. And now to have a holiday to commemorate that, Rick, is nothing short of incredible. I got to ask you, I'm sure you've been playing fantasy just as much as you've been
Yes,
participating and help shaping it for 3+ decades
yes.
now. Rick, we're watching these punishments get off the Richter scale
They're
right
crazy.
now. They're crazy. Give me a little insight. I'm sure you're winning all your leagues, but what has been the craziest punishment that you and your buddies have come up with? And if you ever been in the loser bracket, what's the one that you had to perform?
I don't have a lot of leagues that do have punishments, but one of them that I have, the punishment is the 24 hours in a Waffle House or IHOP, and so they have to, and they can subtract 1 hour for every pancake or waffle they eat. So they gotta eat like 30 waffles in order to leave. And
Oh, that's fun.
so yeah, and because we'll pay it off at our next draft. Sometimes we'll do it 9, 9, and 9 at a baseball game. So 9 hot dogs and 9 beers and 9 innings, and we'll make somebody get sick at a ballpark. So
That's enough to make me feel nauseous right now. Rick, this has been tremendous, man. Thank you for everything that you've done for the industry. If folks want to learn more about DraftNation2026.com, I know that's the website. Where else can they find you guys? How can they get tickets, and how can they get involved in the holiday?
Yeah, I mean, we're on X at DraftNation 2026. Of course, we're run by pundits. Ed Bunnell, who he put fantasy mode in Madden for EA, and then Bill Enright, who of course runs Sports Illustrated. We'll be putting content up, and we'll all be telling you who you should draft and putting some more content up on at DraftNation 2026. And our announcements will be coming from there on X and on Instagram mostly. So that's where you can find us. And then, of course, DraftNation.com, 2026.com. My information's right on there. You can send me a note and or anybody on the team and find out how to get your league there, because that's what it's all about. I made a promo code Garber right before you got on, so people can get 20% off if they use promo code Garber.
Come on. That might be the most value that I've had on my name in a long time, Rick. So you guys heard it first. Drop the last name Garber. Get 20% off. DraftNation2026.com. Rick Wolf, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come hang with us here on the Profluence Pod. We look forward to watching and celebrating all of your tremendous success. And I hope everybody is at Circa, getting their draft on here in a couple months. Rick, talk soon, brother.
Thanks, my man.